Good
Good morning.
I'm Pastor Jane Gingrich, and I serve Hills of Peace Lutheran Church here in Kamloops, British Columbia.
I'm Pastor John Boyd, and I serve St. George's Anglican Parish here in Kamloops, British Columbia.
Welcome to our weekly conversation as a clergy couple, where we engage various topics, one each week. And this week that topic is praying for all in times of transition. We are currently in the first week of school. Teachers have gone back, and students will be going back shortly. And for many students, that looks very different this year, either some online learning or some partial time together, or even the class configuration. And so I think that's one of the transitions that's top of the mind this week. What's another transition you're recognizing in these days?
Just looking at the news, the last couple of days there was an increase, a drastic increase by our numbers in BC of people who were testing positive or reporting positive for COVID. And that's transition in the sense that we were making some progress, especially here in the territory of the people. We were looking to have the bishop-elect possibly move us into phase 3, which means that we would have permission to gather again and receive the Eucharist in one kind. And that has been delayed due to the influence of those high numbers. So it's transitioned from kind of a period of thinking we're on an upswing and elation back down to kind of the waiting plateau that we've been in.
Yeah, and a movement from hopefulness to perhaps longer waiting. Yeah.
More time in the desert.
Yeah. Well, and I know at this time of the year in September, we've seen a number of students moving around. Some from our own community are moving from one apartment building to another, and that's people of all ages, not just students, but students as well, moving cities, some students even moving countries in recent weeks. Significant transitions when a person is downsizing an apartment in which they've lived for a long time and moving into another location, or for a student who is maybe departing from family to go elsewhere, or transitioning communities and needing to rebuild that network of friends and whatnot. So significant transitions for people of a variety of ages when we look at moving and how many people do seem to move end of the summer, start of the year, academic year around September. And that's no different this year. Maybe not as much movement as would typically be the case, but a number of transitions that way.
We've been talking about life transitions around vocation and starting routines. What about people who are involved in the healthcare system and Medicare? What are some transitions there?
Well, I know in some of the circles around our congregation and wider community, a number of people have been waiting on surgeries, and now we're seeing that many have been able to get in and have those surgeries, and some who have been waiting for results are receiving those results, and that in some cases has caused significant life transitions, either in lifestyle or need for changes or even recovery periods, that there's substantial transition around time spent in hospital and medication or medical care or surgery that has been received, and the transitions of life then required as a result of receiving care that hasn't been as easily accessible for a number of months. And so there's some significant transitions through that as well. Are there any other transitions that you know of, or changes of experience or life circumstances through this time that you're hearing about?
Employment. A lot of the jobs that were there that had government funding and were sustained throughout the summer are beginning to drift off. Some people have been laid off from work already. Along with the change in employment opportunities, there's also, at that same time, a seasonal change for us as well, going into fall and a winter where what this winter is going to look like for us is also very much uncertain. And so I think there's a little bit of apprehension around that as well, especially with some of us who've been relying on the possibility of outdoor worship as a way to safely resume gathering. now we have to go fully ahead into planning for indoor services, and having that coincide with everything being cleared for that to be safe as well. So along with the seasonal change, I think some possibilities and some options for how to cope with transition and change here in the middle of this pandemic are also shrinking a little bit too. So we're having to get more imaginative and creative.
Yeah, and as you're talking about seasonal changes, I immediately start thinking of how much more common it is for cold and flu season to occur once we've come into the time of winter. And so even as we're able to open schools and have children at public school and private school right now, there is the possibility and the likelihood that many children will have to go home with a cold or a runny nose or have flu of some kind, feeling sick, which likely has nothing to do with the global pandemic, but will keep them home and out of school when previously they might have continued to attend school. And the impact that has on families, and again, those then trying to work and maintain a balance of school and home, and finding that it could be a very challenging year that way. And so we are in the midst of a wide variety of transitions, but we're also looking ahead to potential other changes. And that's a stressful experience for us as human beings. Any time of turmoil, change, transition, or unknown is uncomfortable for us because it is unfamiliar. And even as we have continued on through this time for so many months, it still isn't comfortable. And so I'm wondering, as we think about supporting those who are going through the midst of life at this time, what are some creative resources or ways that you would suggest to support those experiencing a variety of transitions at this time of life?
I think our liturgy, our Christian worship, is focused on transitions and looks to emphasize and heighten transitions in the order of service that mirror transitions in our life, transitions of our ways of relating to God and speaking to God, and ultimately that draws us into a living practice of prayer. I think we've been talking about all sorts of things that we really need to address and bring into God's presence through prayer and to each other's awareness as well. Or are there forms in the Lutheran tradition of prayer that are really suited to this kind of transitional time?
I think truly any kind of prayer is suitable to life challenges. Typically, I would teach our young people and ensure that they know the Lord's Prayer, given that the language and content includes such a wide range of experiences and is commonly known to so many that it can be a comfort to say those words together. But within the Lutheran liturgy, there are a number of times for prayer, and when there are times that we are struggling individually, sometimes it helps to be held up in prayer. As a congregation, we have a prayer chain, a group of people who have committed to praying for those who need prayer, and they pray for them by name. An individual might have 3 or 4 people that they are praying for, and together the prayer chain prays for everyone on a long list. Mirrored in some ways within the prayers of the people, we also include praying for people by name on Sunday mornings, that at a time of life or through a length of life that is a struggle, many find it supportive and uplifting to know that there is a community holding them up in prayer. And so from the perspective of communal worship, I would say the prayers of the people, the Lord's Prayer, are certainly ways of engaging life's challenges together. And individually, also the Lord's Prayer, and then words that come There are times where we might need to be expressing words of gratitude and praise, and there are times where we are in pain and feel alone and need to name that to God as well. There are times where the words come easily and we have a lot to say, and there are times where perhaps only a few lines or something we can recite is all that we're able to say. And yet, to share with God intentionally that which we're going through, especially changes and struggles and transitions in life, is a way that we can be reminded of God with us through that time as well. Are there forms of prayer or ways of praying that you have found to be particularly helpful through life's transitions?
Lots of them. The ones I think that stand out the most from the Anglican tradition are, of course, the daily office, that sometimes a particular moment of day or a season marks for us a noticeable transition. And there are ways in which prayer and our relationship to God are addressed for those specific times of day or those seasons as well. I think in terms of resources that we have at our hands as well, in the overall worship service, the Eucharistic setting, the prayers of the people are part of an ancient tradition of various litanies that take place throughout the service. And I think occasionally when we have the pieces of litanies that still remain in our services, we forget the longer form. But the longer forms are preserved in our worship resources. And so sometimes, if nothing else, and if you're having trouble connecting to a larger community, as you're praying through these transitions or going through them, sometimes the longer forms of the litany really encompass everything that's going on for us at a given time. And some of those different shorter litanies for specific occasions are also in the Book of Alternative Services. The other thing that's also a helpful resource, access it through the Anglican Church Canada's website, is the Book of Occasional Services, which have even more specific rites and prayers for life occasions and transitions. And that, I think, is really excellent. If there's not something that we find covered or spoken to in our life experience in the regular service book, there is that option as well.
Well, I think as we've talked about using our own words or using words that have been provided to us, that is really both of the primary ways within our traditions that people would pray, to use what has been prepared or to speak from the heart and share words with God that are necessary through a time of prayer or concern. And so, tomorrow, we invite you to join with us in a time of prayer and then a conversation. And having spoken of all of these different forms, we would love to hear from you about your experience of prayer, what you find challenging in sharing with God, or where you find words flow most fluidly. But certainly do join us at 10 o'clock tomorrow, Thursday morning, on Zoom, with the link having been provided to you in email, or please do find it on the Facebook event on Hills of Peace Facebook page.
Thank you for listening.
See you tomorrow.